Welcome to the Beyond Cinema studio up here at Sundance, presented by Celebs.com, Anita Hill, Freida Mock. Firstly, how did the two of you get together, and why, Anita, did you trust Freida with telling this story, your story, in such a kind of declaratory way? Did she just show you her Oscar? Did she bring that to the meeting? We talked about that earlier.
Well, why don't you tell how we got together?
I actually, a friend of hers contacted me and asked if I'd send the film I had done on Tony Kushner called Dancing with Angels.
Yeah.
I said, sure. I said, sure. Why? I'm just curious. And she said, well, I wanted this friend to know what a good film was like. And that she was afraid this friend would say yes to the wrong filmmaker. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, who is this person? And she said, Anita Hill. I said, Anita Hill? I said, oh, if she's going to make a film, then I said, okay, I will send her that film plus the Maya Lin film I had done. And I then wrote her a note saying, if you're going to say yes to a documentary filmmaker, would you not consider me?
Yeah.
So that's how it started about 4 years ago.
Were you actively looking for someone to tell
No,
your
I
story?
was not looking for someone.
Yeah.
I had been approached by different filmmakers, and it seemed as though a film was imminent, and I needed to be a little bit more proactive.
Yeah.
And so I had met Freida a few years before when she was on Martha's Vineyard doing some interviews about Dorothy West. And that was impressive. And just the fact that you had this woman who was such a giant, but who many people had not heard of, and Freida was doing the filming for a documentary about her, and then I saw her work, and of course the work spoke for itself.
Did this feel like the right time? I mean, 20 years. It's like, it feels like it's ages, but do you feel like, does it feel like yesterday? Are the memories so strong of that period, or have you kind of pushed them back into like history mode?
Well, you know, they're a memory, but you know, they're of ongoing relevance, and so you really can't push them back. And so 20 years was important for a number of reasons. We're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the hearings, and of course people were thinking about them. But as I said, it was 20 years, and a generation of people had grown up with a different understanding of what sexual harassment was, what women's voices were about, what our need to have political representation really was about. And
right.
So it was important, I thought, for that generation who had grown up since the hearings to understand why the world today was different from what it was 20 years ago.
I mean, you say that, and I remember there being some articles a couple of years after the hearings saying how sexual harassment claims had like doubled or tripled, or some sort of, you know, impressive multiplication of their previous incarnation. And then also the amount of women that were running for political office received a huge spike, and they credited that to seeing you stand up and perhaps wanting to have more of a voice themselves, and seeing that women, especially because of the way you were characterized and the way people came after you when you decided to testify, that shouldn't be the case and there needed to be more representation.
Well, the amazing thing about the numbers of complaints is that everyone, all the conventional wisdom was that after witnessing what happened to me at the hands of the Senate, no woman would come forward. And women defied them. I mean, you're right, the number of complaints doubled. So it really was, women became aware of their rights and decided, you know what, we've been putting up with this for years and decades and centuries, and now we have an opportunity to do something about it. And they just got mad, and they just filed complaints, and they went in their workplaces, and they changed the rules in workplaces. But sometimes I think some of the most important things that happened were these conversations that people had that didn't come to legal claims, but they had a conversation where they were able to talk about what the problem really was. And people came to a better understanding because of those conversations.
Did you ever think of, I mean, having that responsibility / opportunity / burden of being responsible, of being said to be responsible for these things? Did you think about running for political office rather than academia?
No.
Why not?
Oh, you want to know why? I mean, and well, you know, I know I'm an academic. I know, you know, that is my, the goal is to be effective. And the question you have to ask yourself is, even when something like this monumental happens in your life, how are you most effective, and how can you be true to yourself and who you are, and use your talents to make the change that you want to see happen? Being a politician is one way to do that, but I've chosen another route.
Fair enough. And Freida, did you remember that time? Did you remember that moment when I mean, Thurgood Marshall had come off the bench and they were looking for a replacement? And for a lot of people, and you have a law degree as well.
I don't have I started law
You
school,
started
but
law school.
I just couldn't stand it.
Oh, you couldn't stand it.
I took a leave of absence and that was it.
She's still on leave. She can go back. I can convince her, maybe.
Yeah, the ideal of law would sound
go to
wonderful.
Brandeis and say
Yeah, go to Brandeis. I didn't have a law school though. But did I remember? I think all of us, just. I was thinking the details we don't remember, and that no one watched 9 hours. I didn't know it was 9 hours. I thought it was days in which she testified. But I think that speaks to the impact she had on that one. Whether you saw it as a rerun at night, that impact was so phenomenal that we carried it with us. That the way she was treated, what she said, how she conducted herself, I think it was just so seminal to men and women. Because I met friends who said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing this film." And this one friend who's a lawyer, graduated from the Yale Law School, said, "There doesn't go a year doesn't go by when I wonder how she is, how Anita is doing." So I think that, to answer, I think it had an impact on us. The details, I didn't know who she was, I realized, when I had the opportunity to do this film.
Yeah.
I said, who is she? Where'd she come from? I mean, even though she testified to those details, I think the sensationalism of just the politics of what was going on. I think the public was totally confused about the clarity of what was really going on.
Right, and there were huge groups that were speaking out against the nomination, of course, like the NAACP were against it. The one of the bar councils was, the associations was against it. But what, for you, did you even contemplate the amount of vitriol that would come at you from the Thomas nomination camp? Did you have any idea that it would be that personal an attack?
Well, without being too technical about it, the opposition really occurred, a lot of it, before my testimony.
Right.
And so when my testimony came out, it was sort of, okay, let's not go and surround ourselves or protecting her. So a lot of groups sort of stayed away because they really weren't ready to deal with the issue of sexual harassment. And so I had no idea, of course, that what happened was going to happen. Absolutely not. Here I was, an individual private citizen testifying in a public hearing. I was subpoenaed to testify, and I had at least assumed that I would have an opportunity to do that. But the years of actually abuse that I took afterwards, the kind of vitriol, as you say, that was heaped upon me, I of course could not have anticipated. I don't think anybody would have anticipated that.
Yeah, and so the obvious question, knowing now what you know now, we're always much smarter in hindsight, of course. Would you go down the same path? Would you take the same steps?
Well, yes, because I testified because I knew that the integrity of the court was at stake, and it still is. That hasn't changed, regardless of what happened, what the fallout was. That did not change, and the information that I gave really reflected, I think, someone that was really compromised in terms of being a judge who was going to rule fairly, who was going to respect the law and its applications to everyone, regardless of what their status was. And so it was the right thing to do then, and you do what's right, and I really don't know what else I could have done.
And of course, the kind of famous conflict was with Senator Arlen Specter, who basically accused you of perjury from
Not basically.
He did.
Called
He
it flat out.
He said
flat out perjury.
And there's been speculation as to whether he called you or tried to reach out and extend an olive branch and apologize to you before he passed away. Did that ever happen?
Well, there are different people who recall it differently. I just remember one statement that I read that was attributed to him and they asked if he would apologize to me, and his remark was, or response was, we've learned a lot since then, and we should just leave it at that. So
there was no, your phone didn't ring.
I don't think I was that difficult to find.
Right.
I think they're political animals and that they have a reputation to maintain. And then for them to actually say that would be saying that what went before was fraudulent.
Right, but I also think that being political animals, this was political to them. It wasn't personal. It was not about anything that, they saw me as a part of this political process. And so what happened to me, even though it was deeply personal, didn't resonate with them in the same way that I think it did with thousands, maybe millions of people throughout the country.
Well, obviously the record stands for itself, and the events that transpired afterwards and the empowerment that happened afterwards speaks for itself. So congratulations on that legacy.
And there's still more work to do.
And I mean, when you're replacing Thurgood Marshall on a bench, that's big shoes to fill. So thanks for coming and spending a few minutes with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers.